Welcome to another episode of the Chronic Comeback podcast. This week, I'm really excited to have on the show Kelli Tennant. I actually came across Kelli's story when I was going down an ayahuasca rabbit hole and was looking after having Felix on the show. For those who haven't listened to that episode, Felix healed his Lyme disease through ayahuasca, and so I've been looking into it for quite some time and came across Kelli's story, and I was kind of right, I'm going to go down another rabbit hole, and I just started reading about Kelli and her story and what she's been through, and it really resonated. So before getting sick, Kelli lived a seemingly healthy life, was a successful college volleyball player, and was incredible health, incredible shape, and then came down with mono or EBV outside of the US. And after dealing with this for 8 months, kind of thought she'd got it sorted, and then just got to the point where actually started developing all these weird and wonderful symptoms, which is a common story. It was at this point that her life just seemed to change forever, and then just went on the normal, I say normal, the normal for people with chronic health issues, the normal doctor merry-go-round, the frustrations of not knowing what's going on, and eventually, like years later, coming to the conclusion that she had fibromyalgia, which often raises more questions than answers, and so can create a lot more frustrations. I won't go into too much more detail because then I'll ruin the story, but plenty of ups and downs, and but getting to a point now these days where she's in a far better position health-wise. She runs a really successful podcast. If you're watching this, you can see how cool her background is compared to mine. It's embarrassing. But no, seriously, like reading Kelli's story online just made me smile, because I know it's the exact kind of story that people need to hear. It's the kind of story that I need to hear. There's a lot of parallels between what she's had to go through and what I'm going through. So really excited to have you on the show. Sorry for babbling on for the first few minutes. How's it going?
I'm good, Phil. Thank you so much for having me, and good job on your research. You know my whole life story. I appreciate it.
You've got it all out there. It's impossible now. It's out there.
I know, right? There's no secrets left. Damn it. No, I'm so happy to be with you. And it's so nice to talk to other people who really understand what this journey really looks and feels like, because I think something so important about your show is to create community and have conversations around alternative methods of healing and resources that are outside of the box, because that's really why I started my show when I did almost 3 years ago, was because I wasn't having these conversations with anyone. I had no idea that there was something other than Western medicine. And to your point, things like fibromyalgia and Epstein-Barr and all of these diagnoses and words that are just so big and so convoluted, and you don't know what's right or wrong or true or a lie. And it gets really scary and very isolating. So I just want to commend you for having this show and these conversations, because at the end of the day, people just really want to be acknowledged for their suffering, and find a way to get out of that, and do so in a community. And I think that's so important.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. I wasn't expecting that. Cool. Well, I've given kind of a brief overview of your story, but that's not even really getting into the real detail of it. So could you just talk us through, I mentioned you being, the successful, healthy volleyball player. Could you talk us through like what life was like then, and then just that story of you getting sick and just those kind of early years?
Yeah, for sure. So you really covered a lot of it really well. It was at 17 years old, my freshman year playing volleyball at USC, I had mono for 8 months, which you don't get mono for 8 months. That's just not normal, right? Unless you're someone like us who has something bigger building under the surface. And so I was sick, and then came back from that, got in the best shape of my life. It was between my sophomore and junior year, I was captain of the team. We had an incredible team. I was killing it. I was happy, all things great. And then one day, my left leg went numb and I couldn't stand up. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? And I thought maybe I had squatted too much or did something in the weight room that messed with my back. And so I went down this long journey of about, I don't know, I think it was 8 months from that first day of things continually quickly getting worse. And so it went from my left leg being numb and me not being able to stand up to my left leg literally dragging behind me when I walked, to then being bedridden because I could no longer walk. I was in severe pain from head to toe. I couldn't see straight. Everything was super blurry, really bad brain fog, couldn't think of anything, very depressed, of course, because of all of these things going on, and no idea what was happening. I was at USC working with world-renowned doctors, the best of the best, and no one had any clue what was happening. They were like, maybe it's cancer, maybe you broke your back, maybe you tore a disc, but no scans, no blood work were showing anything. And so I had to retire from playing because I just wasn't getting better and no one had an answer. And at the end of that year, I finally saw a rheumatologist and he was like, oh yeah, you have fibromyalgia. You have pain here, 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 here. I think it was like 11 pain points or whatever. And so that means you have fibromyalgia. You'll never be able to play volleyball again. Here is some medication that will, it was like, it's called Lyrica. I can't remember what it does. It's like a nerve blocker.
Taking that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you have. So I went on Lyrica and that was it. He didn't talk about nutrition. He didn't talk about sleep or anything like meditation, not a word. And I didn't know what any of that was at the time because I was very much like on the path that most of us are. And so I was 19 years old and wanted to die. I mean, I lost everything. I lost my identity. I lost my friends. I lost my life. Luckily, I was able to stay at USC and finish out, but I felt like I had nothing. And so I went on this really dark path for a year and a half, 2 years. They had given me 9 different medications over the course of that first 8 months that were muscle relaxers and pain pills, nerve blockers, sleeping aids, everything you could possibly take, I had. And so I went to really taking medication and drinking and partying and staying out late for that whole time because I wanted to numb out. My body hurt so bad. I ended up having an eating disorder. So I lost like 25, 30 pounds and I just felt so out of control and my body was just freaking out. And then I remember it was about 21 years old after I graduated. I just kept thinking, this can't possibly be my life now. Like this can't be my future. I can't have gone from being one of the best athletes in the country to now this. And so I stopped everything cold turkey one day. I was like, fuck it. I'm not doing this anymore. And I started doing more research. I started getting into these message boards with all these different people with different chronic illness and autoimmune diseases. And I started realizing that there were nutrition methods or ways of eating different than what I had known that could potentially help. And so I started as a vegan, which was so far off from what I was. And I did that for about 2 years. And initially it really helped. I think it really detoxed a lot of stuff in my body. I also didn't drink for that entire time. So I was really in a detox and I saw a lot of the symptoms go away. But then they came back because I think there was just a lot of inflammation in the vegan foods I was eating. So then I found paleo. And when I found paleo, I think it was like 2013. That's what really changed the game for me because I took all these inflammatory foods out and my body started to heal and I was able to do more and I was able to see straight. I wasn't as depressed. And so then that led me to start listening to podcasts. I had never listened to podcasts before then. So I started listening to podcasts and I found people like you talking about these things. And so that's when I found my doctors, an Ayurvedic practitioner and my functional medicine doctor, both in LA. And I found them, gosh, I think it's been 4 or 5 years now. And when I found them, one of the first things that my functional medicine doctor said was, I just want you to know that I believe that chronic illness is psychosomatic. And I was like, fuck you, you're telling me I'm making this up? And he's like, no, you're not making it up. But I believe that this is a physical manifestation of some deeper shit. So we need to talk about all the trauma in your life. We need to talk about what's been going on so that I can have a better understanding of why this is popping up. So he also added, you also need to go see a shaman. And I was like, okay, like what the fuck's a shaman? And I had just started dabbling into spirituality, so it was so far off my beaten path. My Ayurvedic doctor is the one who told me to do ayahuasca and combo. And so I just was like, you know what? I have been suffering for almost 15 years. I'm whatever they say I'm doing, because the people I'm friends with now and I'm listening to in these podcasts, they're telling me that this is how to heal, and I've tried everything else. So let's try it. And within a year and a half, I was completely healed. Yeah. So going from fibromyalgia, Epstein-Barr, to finding the right doctors, being diagnosed properly with knowing I had EBV, chronic fatigue, SIBO, really bad SIBO, which was causing so many things, horrible leaky gut. I had the MTHFR mutation. So all of these things combined, along with coming to terms with like sexual trauma, working in a very toxic work environment, a lot of abandonment issues and stress within my family throughout my life. All these things basically came to a head, and my body was like, we're done. And so I started doing ayahuasca and sitting with mushrooms and detoxing with panchakarma and Ayurveda, really cleaning up my diet, meditating, left my career behind, started a brand new life, broke up with my boyfriend, like everything. And I'm not kidding you, in a year and a half, no symptoms. I have not been sick since.
Oh my. It's an amazing story. First of all, just like there's just so many parallels between what you're talking about and my story. Just really interesting. First of all, you just said panchakarma. I just thought I'd just drop in there. I've mentioned on a few previous podcasts. I went to India and did the 3-week panchakarma.
Shut up! I'm so jealous.
Oh, I wouldn't be. Oh. It was a very uncomfortable experience, and I don't think I wasn't really prepared for what it was. I've had Harsha Patel. She was on my show recently, and she did panchakarma, but she did it in Bali in this like nice, like more like luxury. No, wouldn't say luxurious. a nice place. Whereas mine, there was like I was in this room in India where there was a rat crawling around at night, and it was just a bit. I barely slept. So, but anyway, sorry. It
was too authentic to the culture. You need something a little bit off the beaten path.
Yeah, maybe a bit more Western. But you know, it's just so interesting you're talking about. You had initially, you were of that pure Western mindset, which is exactly what I was like, and not really too. You know, someone says spiritual, you're a bit like, okay, yeah, not for me. And you were just like getting drugs to like block what was going on, right? Like actually block the actual issue and not get to that root cause. And then you start to go down that spiritual path and look at the body healing itself. But then you got to the point where I feel like I'm getting to now, where I've kind of been fighting the whole, it's in your head, but like there's something mentally, my wiring's not quite right. There's something there that's kind of meaning that I can't recover, basically. And doing something like psychedelics, which is something I never thought I would say I would do, is something I'm now seriously considering. And the fact that you've just said a year and a half. So what was it about that then? So what you got to the point where everything had gone a lot better, but then you went down this path where you did ayahuasca, is it Cambo?
Yep.
Cambo, mushrooms. What was it about it? Was it enabled you to confront the things that were really kind of stopping you from healing?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And first of all, I don't think that there's anything wrong with your wiring. That's my opinion. I just want to say that. I believe that we all have a set of experiences and trauma during our lives. I don't think one person listening would be like, I have no trauma, because like, come meet me. I would love to know you. So we have these experiences in our lives. And I really believe that the trauma is stored in our bodies, in our tissue, in our organs, and it stays there. And most of the time, because we're in fight or flight, or we're in, trying to survive, we're in survival mode, we suppress these things. And when you suppress these things, you bury them and you're not acknowledging them. And so you're mentally maybe okay, right? You're like, oh, it's fine. Like, it doesn't bother me, but your body is still experiencing that trauma all the time. There is no way that it just doesn't do that. You can't just say, oh, that's fine, I'm okay, and it just leaves your body. Like it's still there. And so I got to a point where I felt like I had done a lot of things in personal development. I had started to journal and get really honest and let go of a lot of things in my life that I felt like were toxic and making me sick in a variety of ways. And I had started, the right protocols and panchakarmas and all these things. But there were emotional trauma blocks keeping me from that next level of healing. And it's because I didn't have the awarenesses around them. Things like a really traumatic birth that set the stage for a very codependent, toxic relationship with my mom for 30 plus years. And I re-experienced my birth in my first ayahuasca ceremony. And I was able to heal that and talk to my mom about it after in like the 3D and have a conversation. And it completely released this fear and experience that I had. And so for me, ayahuasca, mushrooms, combo, all very different experiences, but they allow you to acknowledge what you've been through and also understand how everything fits together. I like to describe when I do psychedelics, it's almost like, you have a puzzle, but there's so many pieces missing. And when you sit with some plant medicine, it starts giving you more of the puzzle pieces. The things that you've blacked out, the things that you've suppressed, the parts of yourself you haven't been willing to see. And those things start coming up. And what gets to happen for you is that you get to let them come up. You get to acknowledge them, no matter how scary or uncomfortable they are, and let them move through your body and out. Because when you can acknowledge and recognize the trauma and maybe not reliving it, we don't need to necessarily relive the trauma in order to let it go or move through it, but to acknowledge it and then let it come out of us. And when you have that better awareness and understanding of how all these things have played into the manifestation of a physical illness or belief system, then you can have the awareness that you no longer have to hold on to these stories. I no longer had to hold on to the story that my mom didn't want me and rejected me and that I had severe abandonment issues from that. That was a story created from a birth experience that my whole identity is wrapped up into that. And so everywhere I go, I have experiences of, I'm going to be rejected or abandoned. And so when you start to see that pattern throughout your life that is all linked back to that experience, you get to let go of that bullshit story and say, I can rewrite this narrative because I don't have to keep carrying this with me. And I think that's where our bodies revolt against us and start acting up. They're trying to tell us something needs to come out, but we keep pushing it down. And when you start letting it up and move out, that is when you begin to heal.
It's really interesting that because whenever I've seen someone who's a bit more spiritual, and they talk about, what were you going through at the time you started to develop symptoms? And I was like, it was actually the best time of my life. I was traveling. I hadn't had any trauma or anything like that. And it's really interesting that people have talked about birth trauma and trauma that you're not even aware of. I consider myself quite lucky in terms of my childhood. I can't remember anything compared to, some of the horror stories you hear about. I'm like, well, why? Surely I don't have anything worse than them. It's really interesting that you say childbirth and just stuff you don't know about that could actually be causing you problems. So is that what would you say to someone now who's listening to this, who's saying, look, I don't care what you say, it's physical only, there's nothing to that. Because I'm sure I don't know how many years ago, 6 or 7 years ago, you might have said that. You might have been that person. And what would you say to someone who's kind of completely dismissing that?
Why do you want to stay sick?
That's a good response.
Think about how many people actually get something out of being sick. So I have a coach, her name's Abby Gibb, and we had this conversation 2 weeks ago, and it was such an aha moment for me. I realized that I have had to create storms in my life in order to get the attention and love that I didn't get as a child. And so what I mean by that is, as we were talking, my entire 15-year journey of chronic illness flashed before my eyes. I didn't feel like I was acknowledged, seen, held throughout my life, really, by my parents, but specifically as a young person. And so I created really big, life-altering, dramatic storms in order to get the attention and love and whatever else I was needing that I didn't get back then.
Mm.
And in being sick, I kept getting what I wanted. I was treated special. I was always checked on. Everyone wanted to make sure if I was okay. All these things. I got compassion, and people really like asked what was happening and cared. And so that was something I got out of being sick. So then my identity becomes wrapped in being sick in order to get what I need. Now, did I know I was doing that? Absolutely not. I didn't even know I was doing that until 2 weeks ago on this phone call, right? But that is deep-seated trauma and wounding that I was never aware of until I started really asking better questions. And what I would say to people who are like, it's purely physical, that's it. One, why do you want to stay sick? And two, what if there is something else out there? What if there is a lesson for you to see here? What if you tried something different and looked at other options? And who do you get to be without this illness? People are so scared to be healthy and happy. People are so scared of pleasure and success because most of us, how old are you?
I'm 34.
Yeah, I'm 33. Most of us, and I'm sure that's like the age of a lot of your listeners, are not taught as young people that pleasure and joy and fun and play is good. How many times are you told, no, stop, that's bad, don't do that, you're a bad boy, you're a bad girl, blah, 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 blah. That's all we hear is like this negative shit around fun and pleasure and joy. So we believe that that's bad. So anytime there is an opportunity to be healthy, to have the life we want, to experience joy and pleasure, we self-sabotage. And sometimes that looks like I would rather stay sick and stay inside of this stupid ass box that I've been in for however long, because what's outside there, though it may feel better and the experience may be better and I get to have access to all these things, I don't know what that's like and I don't want to touch that.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. And do you think there's an element of, so for me, what I struggle with, like from a mental point of view, I actually, in recent years, when I've surrounded myself with positive stories, listening to, stories like yourself, I'm generally a lot more upbeat and I am very positive, and I consistently say and try to visualize, myself getting better. Yet every single time I go into a new treatment, there's this thing in the back of my head that's saying, this isn't going to work. It's not going to work. You've been sick for ages. It's not going to change. You don't even know what it's like to be healthy. And that for me it sounds like a self-sabotaging voice, and kind of what you were saying then. Is that kind of similar to what you're saying? There is something that deep down, or like almost actually wants me to stay like I am?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I also want to acknowledge, I totally know that feeling and I have been there too. Like it really sucks when you try everything and nothing's working. So I don't want to discount that, because I think we all go through that. The next thing after that is to ask, what would happen if I allowed myself to heal? So it's almost like you create energetic blocks from allowing something to help you. Do I believe that every treatment is the answer? No, I've tried literally all the things. The thing that really made a difference for me was ozone therapy, but I was also doing all this other stuff, all the, plant medicine and holistic healing and panchakarma and all that. But I've tried everything. I've taken all the drugs. I've done all the things. But I believe that when we go in with that energy, that we're creating a block of receiving. It's like, nope, doesn't work. Okay, well then why would it work? And my question to you would be, what is your fear around healing?
I mean, I don't feel like I've got one. That's right. I don't feel like I have got a fear around healing. I think it's more just because I've tried so many things. I've gone and done so many crazy things, like going to India. traveled to the States a number of times, Germany loads of times. And there's just, I think it's the way I kind of liken it to is just, I've been kind of like burnt so many times by getting my hopes up. And it's almost like there's something inside of me saying, I don't want to get my hopes up too much this time because I know it's not going to happen. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. So what if, and I'm not trying to project this on you, I'm just asking a question. What if all these treatments are not actually the answer? So there's like this idea of, well, I need to look outside of myself to find the answer. But what if the answer is to go within?
Yeah. And that's, I agree with you. And then that's why I'm at the position I'm in, and kind of potentially a month away from going and having my first ayahuasca experience. I think I've had the closest. I've done a lot of breath work and stuff with like Wim Hof, been on like Wim Hof retreats and stuff like that. And when you're in that state that breath work can get you into, and I remember I was in Guatemala of all places, and I was doing this breath work, and I from the first time I was like naturally high in my whole life, but I was so connected to everything, but also I didn't care that I was sick. I didn't care. I genuinely did not care in that moment. And that was a really strange feeling because I care about it all the time, and I'm really, so I think, I mean, I've kind of gone down a bit of a weird rabbit hole there, but like, I know that in itself, doing work like that is the important thing to do alongside all of the other stuff. And I think it's really important that people listen to the story that you've been through and realize that, it's important to do all of the treatments, but they do need to focus on what's going on inside, but also so they'll be a better person once they're healthy. Because I mean, the person you are now compared to the person you could have been is so different, right?
Completely. And what I also want to offer is that, and look, plant medicine is not for everyone. I would never try and talk anyone into it. You must be called to it. It must be for you. So I will preface this with that. The beautiful thing about plant medicine is that it allows you to take ownership over your own healing. We have been taught to give our power away to other people to heal us. We have been taught to look to people to be our guru, our healer, our shaman. Please come in, fix me. I am broken. Okay, when we get out of the I am broken mentality and we take ownership back of our own experience and our own healing, that is when the actual fucking work begins. And that is what plant medicine allows. Plant medicine is not allowing someone else to fix you. Plant medicine is giving you access to yourself. Plant medicine is giving you access to your truth, your knowledge, your awareness inside of you, where you have hidden it, suppressed it, and kept it from yourself because it's scary. And we don't know how to access it until we do. And then we're like, oh, right, I remember. It's a remembering. It's a coming back to self. And when you're in these experiences, it's like you hear this higher version of yourself that does not have doubt. The way I hear is, when I am sitting with mushrooms or ayahuasca, is it's like a very clear conversation to me. And it's like, this is what's going on. This is what you get to see. Here's how we're putting all this together. And look, here's all the experiences we're going to show you now that are actually all linked back to what's been going on for you. And we're going to unlock this, but it's all me. I'm the one doing it. And so then when you take that power back and you understand yourself and have that awareness, you're no longer looking outside of yourself for the answers or for someone to fix you, because in that experience, you realize you were never broken.
Mm. Do you think there's, and we're kind of, I guess we're going, just because I find it interesting, like I kind of take the conversation a bit of a different angle. Do you think, so for example, there could be a person who comes down sick, gets Lyme, for example, they have antibiotics and they actually just recover, and they don't need to do any of this kind of go on this journey, which is, 14, 15 years. They don't have to do all the internal work. Do you think, way I kind of reason with myself with something like that is that they don't actually need they don't need to learn the lessons that someone maybe like me and you do, and that actually if we go with the journey like we're on and try and learn the lessons we're meant to learn, the person will be on the other side is amazing, whereas that particular person, it's not meant for them. They're not meant to go on this kind of journey. Do you think there's an element of that?
Yes, completely. I believe everything happens for a reason in divine timing and with purpose.
Mm,
And if someone gets Lyme and is able to take antibiotics and be fine 2 weeks later, then that is their path. That doesn't mean mine is going to look like that. I believe I needed 15 years to go through this so that I could sit here with you and help other people. That's why I have no regrets and would take not one moment of it back. The severe pain, the suicidal thoughts, the hating my life, everything being given up, like all those things, I would do all over again because I get to sit here healthy now, having had that experience and an awakening over and over and over again in order to be able to have a conversation to show people what is possible.
mm. How has that affected relationships in your life? So taking it back to, obviously you got this, like, so I was 22 when I started to develop symptoms, but it didn't get bad until I was 28. I was kind of, I knew something wasn't right, but I was able to just live a normal-ish life. But you had this from like a really young age, and young people aren't very patient. So when you've got friends around you who are, wanting to go out and party and, wanting to go and do their own things, they can be, in the nicest possible way, they can be a bit selfish. How has that affected your relationships over the years? And like, have you had to cut a lot of people out of your life?
Yeah, such a great question. It was really hard. I remember my boyfriend when I was 19 early on, he told me I was making it up and that nothing was wrong. And so we ended up breaking up. But I lost a lot of friends because I also didn't know what was going on. So I really self-isolated and pushed people away because I went from being like Kelli Tennant, the volleyball player that everyone knows nationally. I was on the cover of Volleyball Magazine. I was a top 5 recruit. I was like this person, right? And then all of a sudden, I wasn't that person. And I had no idea who I was. I had been the star volleyball player since I was 10 years old. And that's all I knew. And so I really didn't know how to operate in the world. So I pushed people away. And like I said, I was doing all these medications and mixing them and drinking and staying out late and had an eating disorder and was just being super just odd and not myself. And it took me a long time to start developing healthy relationships because my sense of identity and sense of self was so shattered at that time. I really had to figure out who I was. And while I was sick that whole time, I was on television. I was a TV host and reporter. So I was almost living this double life where I wanted to die on the inside because I was in so much pain and I was so sick. But then I was like the hot chick on TV that all the guys wanted to talk to. And so I was almost 2 versions of myself. So I would be at Dodger Stadium for 11 hours doing a show and then come home and couldn't get out of bed for 3 days. And that was really hard. And I couldn't have relationships during that time. It was too overwhelming to try and just balance being these 2 people and showing up and trying to keep and build a career. And then like in romantic relationships, I did not have a great sex drive. And my body always hurt. So I was always like, I can't go do this, or I'm too tired, or, all those things. And that made it really difficult because I feel like I was never able to really connect with people. And I didn't really know myself. And so I think it was always this like barrier to entry. And so my relationships now compared to when I was super sick, it's just completely different because I can be vulnerable. I can be open. I have energy. I can have fun. I allow myself to have fun and play because I've done all this healing work. So yeah, it's definitely been a journey for sure.
I think it's really difficult for people to understand. There's 2 things, right? I feel like people with chronic illness almost like they want people to understand so much and like get what I'm going through, get this pain that I'm going through, but they're never ever going to understand. And so I think the sooner I say this to myself, like the sooner I realize that and I purposely don't like, complain and moan about it because it actually doesn't help. In fact, it just puts negativity out there and does put a little bit more of a barrier between me and that person. but then also, I don't know, there needs to also be a level of understanding from the people who are around you. I quite often get people go, oh, how you doing? Are you still dealing with that thing? And oh, was it like, and they don't get that it's a 24/7 thing. They think that it's like this, this thing that happens every now and then. So that's why it's so difficult. It's such a fine balance to strike to get relationships, and the ones that you can, that do understand, you need to keep those close, but also bring new people into your life that get it. And I guess that's another thing, by going down that kind of spiritual path that you've gone down, and the one that I'm going down, you do meet new people that get it. Have you had new people come into your life? Obviously, your partner, now your boyfriend, he's come into your life. In addition to him, have you had like more and more people come into your life that get it because you've gone down that particular path?
Yes, absolutely. And I have a lot of friends who have lived with chronic illness. A lot of podcasters that I'm friends with and work with in our production company, they're all people who have lived with chronic illness of some form. And we all have the same experience of coming to the realization that, okay, this is a psychosomatic issue and I need to work through a lot of these things that have come up. And I also need to lean on people who can expand me, who can ask me better questions, who can provide resources and conversations outside of what I have been fed for my whole life by society, of the standard of healthcare and healing and what actually feeling healthy is like. The thing that amazes me is that we actually, as a society all over the world, think that having chronic constipation or diarrhea or headaches or can't sleep or, wake up in the middle of the night, we think these things are normal. This is not normal. You don't have to live like that. You don't have to take Advil every day to make your headaches go away. You don't need to take Pepto-Bismol or, sleeping pills. Like, these are not the answers, but that's what we believe. And people aren't asking better questions in order to get us on the other side. And so if I'm someone who is sick right now listening to this, I would just start surrounding myself with people who can ask better questions. Because if you're just surrounded with a bunch of people who are staying at your standard of healthcare, how are you ever going to know what else is possible? That's so important, to have someone expand your awareness in anything. Maybe it's business, maybe it's coaching, maybe it's spirituality, maybe it's health, but we only know what we know until we know something new. And how do you know something new? How do you expose yourself to that? You surround yourself with people who can expand that for you. And that is what gets us out of this constant spiral of lies and bullshit for ourselves and what we've been taught.
Yeah. And yeah, it's so interesting you say that about, because you are the average of the 5 people you hang out with. I really much take that to heart, because from an entrepreneurial standpoint. So me and one of my best friends launched our own business, online business in the last year. It's something we've been working on for quite some time. And I, from day one, have said we need to spend as much money on being in the room as millionaires, essentially, people who have gone and done it, and we can know what's possible. But then I kind of don't take my own advice for health. I listen to a lot of stories. I do a lot of work online, but I actually don't really have that many. I've got a guy who's a really good friend of mine. He's been on the podcast. We met, learning to meditate. He's now a meditation teacher. But other than that, I don't really have many other people that I socially hang out with and kind of can, just talk through kind of ideas and stuff like that. And how did you manage to kind of get into that circle of so many people that are going through something? And how did that happen?
Well, I will say first, I remember when I was really sick in the early stages, and I was in all of these chronic illness groups on Facebook, and that will keep you sick, because guess what? This goes back to what I said early on. People want to stay sick. If you're only surrounding yourself with other people having that experience, you are now going to create an identity around this is how I connect, and we can all feel crappy together. So that's part one. Part two is I just started looking at people who had different ideas about what was possible. And I would say, okay, probably like someone listening to me, that girl might be batshit crazy. Ayahuasca, are you kidding me? Like, I'm going to relive my birth trauma in order to heal from Lyme disease or fibromyalgia. Totally get where you're coming from, honey. I hear you. And guess what? Like, guess what's possible for you if you think outside the box and you listen to someone who may sound crazy? Because what if you're judging them and their craziness because you're actually curious about, could I have that? Is that possible for me? Yeah. Because we only judge things when there's something there for us to see and learn. Because we wouldn't judge it if there wasn't, because it wouldn't matter to us. We wouldn't need to put that energy into it. So if you're sitting here listening to me being like, that bitch is crazy, I would never do that, blah, blah, blah. Start asking yourself questions around why you're being so judgmental of me, because there might be something there for you. And maybe that does not mean you go to Peru or Costa Rica and do ayahuasca. Maybe it means you ask yourself better questions. But when I started really listening to the people I was judging, that is when I expanded and I saw what I was actually meant to see there, which was lessons and experiences that would help me move further along in my path and let go of this identity of being sick.
Yeah. I hope there's no one out there thinking you're batshit crazy. And then, I mean, the scary thing is, you know, you're talking about birth trauma and I'm there like nodding along, because I completely agree with it. Whereas I think it's really, to anyone listening who, you know, this is like a bit too out there, it's about taking the first step down, doing something that you're not quite comfortable with. And for me, that was, you know, meditating and, you know, maybe even I remember even going to yoga. I remember telling my friends I was going to yoga. This was 6 years ago. And they were just like, you're doing what? And that was like, I think that was the first thing I started to do that wasn't quite what I would, you know, normally do, like a, you know, masculine guy in his 20s. And then as soon as you start doing, I mean, classic me, the way I work, it's all or nothing. If I went to the meditation thing to learn, I then did the advanced thing. I then went to a retreat. And then you start speaking to people who are trying all these other things. And I guess whilst I haven't got a lot of like close friends in these circles, I do go to, you know, Wim Hof retreats, you know, the Panchkarma thing, you know, all of these other things where you do just get out of your own, you know, your own periphery vision, really, and you actually just start speaking to people who can offer some really cool insights into how your life can be so much better. Because it's not just a health thing, really. It's not your physical side of things. Actually, I think I've said it on a podcast before. You start to actually believe that life is a lot more magical than you previously thought it was. A bit like the belief you had when you were a kid that anything's possible. Is that the kind of right, you know, the right mindset that you're talking about? That it is almost that you talk about play a lot, like believing in things that you didn't think were possible before.
Yeah, completely. Because think about when we're kids, most of us are more playful, we're more creative, we have imaginary friends, we like can come up with a game at the drop of a hat. Like, it's just a different experience. And then along the way, we lose that and we create experiences that are full of anxiety and stress, and then bad things happen, and maybe it's sexual trauma, maybe you get in a horrible car accident, maybe your parents die, all these things happen, and so you lose sight of that allowance and play and fun. And when you are, it's like, think about how light you feel when you're happy and playful and maybe having great sex, and it's so much pleasure in your body and you feel light and it's so enjoyable. And then think about how you feel when you're bogged down by all of these hard things and stress and anxiety. And it's really difficult to remember what was when you feel like you have a boulder on top of you and you're surrounded by a tornado and nothing makes sense. You don't feel good. You're like, this is my life. I hate it. Ugh. right? It's really hard to see that other opportunity. And so really all of this work is about finding that again, allowing yourself to find that, knowing it's safe to find that, creating safety in your body and your experience to allow and to receive and to play, because you have to really rewire your entire system, your nervous system, from trauma and tragedy, sadness into pleasure and joy and happiness. And that takes time.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry, just I have to take a moment because it's like, it's just, what you're saying is just speaking to everything that I kind of like need to hear right now. And I think people can go down the route of just focusing on, I need to take, I mean, I was just, okay, I'm down this natural route. So I'm just taking supplements. I'm just focusing on my diet. But yeah, I was getting and I'm still doing this now, every night. Now I'm trying to get in a better routine, but I'd be just drinking a coffee like within like an hour of me waking up, not meditating. And I know coffee for some people is fine, but for me, when I'm trying to calm like my nervous system down, not meditating, drinking coffee, it is kind of that self-sabotage thing. And yeah, I really kind of doing that inner work to understand why I'm doing that as well. Does it give you, and this is again out of my own interest really, doing stuff like, I don't want to talk about psychedelics too much because, as you say, it's not really for everyone. But it's my podcast, so I'm going to ask selfish questions.
Fuck yeah.
Does it? Would it kind of like tell you what? I know it's not going to tell you all the answers, but would you get an understanding of? So for me, for example, I will do stuff knowing that it's not good for my health. I'll know that it's not good for my health, but I'm like, oh God, well, I'm not feeling good anyway. I might as well just do it. So I'll have like a short-term burst of like feeling good, coffee being the example for me. Will you get insights on stuff like that and why I do that?
Mm-hmm. Because there is likely a underlying worthiness and value issue for you. So I don't believe I am worthy of feeling good. I don't believe I deserve XYZ. So I self-sabotage to keep myself here. And so when you get into plant medicine, I like to go in with the intention of show me what I'm meant to see, because we're not here to be in control. The whole point of that is to release control and allow what is meant to come forward. Now, when I sit with mushrooms, I have a little more of an intention of, okay, I really want to sit and gain clarity around these things. But the way I gain clarity around them is so convoluted. I'm like, how did you pick that thing from over there that seemingly has nothing to do with what I'm struggling with and make it all make sense? Like, I have conversations with the mushrooms and I ask them this, and then I laugh when they show me things because I'm like, this is so ridiculous. And I would have never thought to think about this scene in my life or this experience having anything to do with this. So I think that it's just like, for you, you're in this place where I feel like I was before I went to do ayahuasca. You're feeling called to it. You're feeling a block. You've done all these things and you're like, okay, now what? I need some more guidance. I need support. And so what I would recommend is to go in open and allow what is meant to come forward, because it will give you the answers you're seeking. It's just not going to show up in the way you thought, but that's the whole point.
Yeah, I think I have a big trouble in kind of like going into these things, I set too much expectation. And yeah, I've even thought about the intention side of things. I've been like overanalyzing, like, what intention should I be setting? And it's interesting that you said just actually it should be show me what I need at this time. And I guess there's that element of me wanting to control it. And like, no, I want to tell them what I need. But what you're saying is, no, you need to be kind of shown what you need.
Well, because think about it. It's your ego that is panicking. Your ego is trying to keep you safe right now. So it's like, no, we need to latch on. We need to know what we're going into. We need to know what it's going to be like. We need to have control over this experience. So if you could release that for a second and really get clear with yourself and ask, what do I really need at this time? You don't need more control. No one needs more control.
Definitely don't.
By the way, control is a fucking illusion and doesn't even exist. Yeah. We think we have control over all these things, Do we? I don't believe we do. So all you can do is show up and say, guide me, and just melt into the experience. I know so many people have so many different experiences, which is why I hesitate giving super detailed accounts of my ceremonies, because I'm like very much a purging person. I throw up the whole time. I rock back and forth. I like go into yoga poses. I'm sobbing. I feel like I'm going to die. I'm in like all these past lives. I know people who, I mean, Connor barely ever purges physically into a bucket. His is very much more like experiencing different scenes of his life. And then we've seen people who just dance the whole time, and that's what they needed. They think that they need to go in and like throw up and have this really violent experience. Homegirl needed to dance for 6 hours a night, 3 days straight, and came out feeling more alive and more connected and more clear than ever. So you don't know what your body actually needs. You get to let your body tell you and allow that to come forward.
Okay. I would like the dancing experience though, if that's possible.
Yes, yes. I will send you dancing vibes.
So, I mean, I know the answer to this, but could you talk me through the ways in which your life has been made so much better by being sick? Because I was going to ask you, if you could go back and someone could just say, oh, you're not going to go through this. You're going to just have a normal life. You'll be healthy, but you'll go down the path you would have gone down. Would you do that? I think I know the answer, but if you could give me the answer and then tell me, all the reasons you're grateful for what's happened.
Yeah, I definitely have no regrets around being ill. I don't have regrets around anything in my life, because I just believe that everything is leading us to where we are and where we're going. And we don't get the lesson we need unless we go through that experience. And yes, sometimes we make it harder on ourselves. Sometimes it has to be painful because, someone like me, if I don't get hit by a truck, I'm not listening. It can't be like a subtle, like, hey, Kel, here's this thing for you. I'm like, no, you need to be engaged to a guy who lost his leg in a motorcycle accident 2 weeks before you met, and then you will learn the lesson. Like, that is how I learn. And that is what chronic illness has been. That has been so many different things. And I realized that all of these experiences have culminated for me to be a better teacher, a better friend, a better partner, a better dog mom, a future mother of children, all these things, because I have more experience and more context than I would have had life been quote unquote easy and I could have just floated through. And I have a level of self-awareness now that I didn't have before. So when things come up in my life now, it doesn't take me months to move through it. It doesn't take me months to understand it. For the most part, something comes up and within 20 seconds, I'm like, oh, that's that thing happening. This is my old reaction, and I get to repattern this and make a new choice. I wouldn't be able to do that without all of these experiences. And I wouldn't be able to teach the way I do or have conversations with people like you if I hadn't gotten to go through this. And so I think that we're all shifting the narrative around what's possible, not only in healthcare, but in every aspect of life. What is possible for us outside of this box that we have been trained to stay in? And so I'm so grateful that I get to speak out about it and have the courage and ability to do so, because I know that it's really tough and I've been there. And so I can relate in so many ways to people who are going through it now.
That was a good answer.
Thank you.
No, I think you seem very comfortable in your own skin as well, and I imagine that comes through, in internal work, knowing who you are. You said you previously didn't know who you were at all, and what going through, what you've been through, it certainly gives you, your identity. You find out who you are. And I think it's interesting you said about future children. I think about that. I don't have kids, but when I think about having kids and kind of how the environment that they will grow up in, for me, having gone through this experience, is actually like quite a cool thought to have. And I won't be this stressed out, angry person that I could have been if maybe not angry, stressed out person that I would have been. I'll be able to, you mentioned there, like, something coming up and you going, oh, that's what that is, and like reasoning with it. I feel like I've got an awareness when something comes up, but I still can't control my emotions around it. I still dwell on it, and I'm like, yeah, that's there, but I'm still annoyed about it, or I'm still like upset about it, or something like that. So do you have that now where you're actually, okay, that's what that is, I've got this emotion, and you're able to actually control that emotion through the, you observing it?
So I never want to control my emotion, but for but for me, the way I would explain it is I just have a really great understanding of what my core wounds are and the experiences that have really shaped me. And so when something comes up, like one of my biggest issues has been abandonment. So I have this deep-seated fear that Connor is going to leave me. And it may be irrational. We're great. Things are awesome. We're super happy. But it will come up every now and then. And I will sometimes lash out like a little kid because I'm like, I want you to pick me and choose me and love me. And I want to be the most important thing in your life because I didn't feel that emotionally as a child. And so now I know those things. So when I have that come up and I start like bitching at him and projecting all my stuff onto him, and he's just sitting there like, what are you doing? This doesn't even make sense. I can just pause for a second and ask myself, what do I need right now? What's going on? Oh, right. That's that thing. We have this core wound around abandonment, but that's not necessary here right now. You're safe. You're loved. You're good. And then I just let it go. And I realize that it's just an old pattern that pops up for me to get to see and then release. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that does for sure. Cool. So what would be your, I mean, you've given a lot of good advice to people, who are currently listening to this, who, in a difficult situation. There'll be people who are, at the very much the beginning of their journey. There'll be people who are, 20 years in. What's your advice to someone like mentally right now who's going through a really tough time and they can't see a way out of this? What's your advice to them?
I think the first thing, and I learned this in ayahuasca, is that you always have your breath. I forget to breathe and it gets really scary. So I've had like very severe panic attacks during my life. And if anyone has had a panic attack, you feel like you can't breathe. You feel like everything's caving in and getting dark and you just don't have an exit. And I learned this during ayahuasca because it can get very overwhelming. And they teach you that every time it seems like it's getting to be too much, just come back to your breath. And so I think that if we all breathed a little more consciously, a little deeper, we would be able to reconnect with ourselves and our bodies. So that would be the first thing. And the second is to do things that are really nourishing for you without talking yourself out of them. So I teach the women in my community to just sit with themselves, really try and clear the noise and get quiet and ask, what do I need right now? And I put my hand over my chest and over my womb. Men can do this too. And I just sit with myself and I say, what do I need right now? And usually it's some form of like nourishing being held. And so I take a bath, or I go ask Connor for a hug, or I connect with a girlfriend because I really just feel like I want to be seen and acknowledged, doing things that feel really nourishing without talking myself out of them and saying, oh, that's stupid, or why would I take a bath right now? I'm in too much pain, or I'm so angry. What can you do for yourself that feels really good? Because the more we nourish ourselves and get ourselves out of this spiral, the more we see clearly and can make different choices for ourselves. But if you're not taking care of yourself on that like base foundation level, which for most of us feels really uncomfortable, how do you ever expect yourself to be able to think and see clearly and make choices that are out of expansion and abundance and health rather than this fear mindset?
No, definitely. I think a lot of people, including myself, I put a lot of things before my health, even though my health is always on my mind. It's always something that I am thinking about, and yet I put things ahead of that quite consistently. And so, sorry.
Why do you do that?
Oh no, we're going down this route. Why do I do that? I think it's just, I think it's, there's an element of me that I want to, I don't want my life, I put my life a bit on hold at some stage in when, you know, when I was trying to get better. And I just thought, oh, I need to stop everything and just focus solely on, you know, getting better. And that kind of, then I wasn't, you know, I find other parts of my life really exciting and I like to focus on them and they distract me. So yeah, I'd say that's my reason.
So I would just love to reflect to you what I've heard over this time together is you seem to be very good at the external reach and filling your space with all this stuff in order to keep yourself from your truth.
Mm.
And I feel like that's probably why you're being called to do ayahuasca now. Because there's a part of you that is like coming to awareness with that and realizing if I keep filling my space with all this stuff, then I will never find myself. Because you get lost in your own shuffle.
Yeah. I think you might have nailed that on the head.
And I also want to say, it's funny because you're attractive guy, well-spoken, great personality, charming, all these things. And it seems to me like people like that, I would put myself in that category as well. We can talk ourselves in circles and talk ourselves out of a lot of things.
Mm.
And that's like a beautiful gift in a way, but it's also the shadow side of that is that you can talk yourself out of your own healing and out of finding your truth because there's always something to like talk around out here. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. I often say it to my girlfriend, just, I think what makes me good at my job and stuff like that, kind of, I've got a real all or nothing personality. I'll really go at things and I'll go at it full tilt. And I'm like that in a conversation. I'm like that. But then that's also the same thing I think that is keeping me sick and got me sick in the first place. And I do have an awareness of that. It's just how to get yourself out of that. Hence why we're talking about plant medicine.
Sure. That's great.
Yeah, cool. No, I think that's a really good place to kind of bring things to a close. One thing I did want to bring up actually, and again, it's kind of where I see like parallels between what I've been through. Like I left my job. I wasn't a cool reporter. I was a recruitment consultant in an office, so I was a lot more desperate to leave that. But now I'm in a situation where I'm like, I still do a bit of that to kind of like earn money, but then I'm launching my own business, but everything is on my terms. I manage my own time. Can work from anywhere in the world. And that wouldn't have happened. I know it wouldn't have happened. I would be in an office for sure post-COVID had it not been for my illness. And it sounds like you done the same thing. You've got this really cool podcast. I looked on your website. You have people in your community that you help, and that's, if I'm not correct, like you actually, that is what you do now. That's your job. Is that right?
Yeah. So when I left TV, I started my podcast, and then a year ago, we launched our media company, which does production for about 35 podcasts. As well as we're doing docuseries now and just behind the scenes creative production. And that was always my dream when I was in television. And I was like the token hot chick. So every time I would come up with an idea or pitch a show, it was shot down. And I just realized that had I not been sick and had I not shed all of these things, I wouldn't have been able to create the life I have now. And I left LA and we moved to Denver a year and a half ago. And we have dogs and we make our own schedule. And I run a team of 9 people and we have this amazing company. And I get to talk about the things that I love in the merging of spirituality and sexuality and help women really uncover themselves and their truth. And none of that would be possible had I not had those experiences before. And it's like you said, it's on my terms. It's what makes me happy. It's what lights my soul on fire. And that's what truly matters. I feel fulfilled and happy in a way that I didn't know was possible before. And it really was step by step of finding myself and listening to the little like cues and following the breadcrumbs to get to this point.
Awesome. And and that's what I want people to hear when they're listening to this. That, and this is what I've got, you know, my belief, my vision for myself is that I'm going to get healthy, but actually my life is going to be so much better than it would have been. My health is going to be so much better than it would have been, and I can already see it happening. But it's just about, you know, can keep going and keep going. So yeah, I think, you know, being able to, if someone had said to you, you know, when you were in the middle, you know, you were a reporter, you were living that double life, that you would have the life you had now, would you have believed?
No.
No.
I would have thought they were crazy. And I mean, I was the girl trying to make it and become a big star at ESPN or be on Good Morning America. That was really everything to me. And I realized that that wasn't the dream that would fulfill me. And yeah, you don't know when you're in the middle of it. And then you take a step out and you just see all the other possibilities, like you said, outside of your periphery. And you're like, oh, okay. Didn't even see any of that was there.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. So if people want to connect with you, I'm sure, you know, there'll be plenty of questions for you. If people want to connect with you, look you up, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, so my Instagram is Kelli M. Tennant, and then my website is kellitennant.com, and I'm pretty active in the DMs. So if anyone has a question, please message me.
Awesome. I'll include that in the notes if anyone wants that. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on. I feel like I've had a bit of a therapy session myself.
I hear that often. Sorry.
No, in a good way. You caught me off guard. I'm sure I'll have some friends listening who enjoyed me.
Getting roasted. Getting roasted by the damn American girl, dude. What are you doing? Thank you so much for having me, Phil. And truly, I just really commend you for doing this work. It's so important. And I know you're helping so many people. And I just, from my perspective, really appreciate that.
Awesome. No, appreciate that. And thank you so much for coming.